What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our Big 12 football channel. We continue to bring you the top 10 players for every Big 12 team heading into the 2019 season. We gave you Texas already. That was the first video. Now we move on to Oklahoma. And, of course, it's really tough to narrow this down to just 10 players and then trying to position those players, you know, where you've got guys that are in certain positions that are going to have a much bigger impact than other positions, like the quarterback position, for example. So it can make it tough, make it a little bit tricky to do these videos, but we put it together the best that we can. And of course, Oklahoma fans, you guys let me know who I leave off this video, how you would change it, because you know your team better than anyone else, and that's something that you know, I can't know every team as well as the fans of that team can know them, but I can know each team pretty well and try to do the best that I can when putting these rankings together. I'll give you two names that I left off that I think deserve recognition. And I don't think we put any freshmen for Oklahoma, so I didn't even, there were so many players already there, I didn't even really go into the freshmen, but I'm sure there'll be some of those that have an impact as well. But Creed Humphrey, the center on the offensive line, going to be a big impact for this team. Most experienced player back on that offensive line. They really don't have a whole lot of experience with guys that they lost from last season. That to me is a pretty big concern for Oklahoma, but you've got him. And then Lee Morris, the wide receiver, I think he can maybe step into that number 2 wide receiver role this year. They've got a lot of talent, a lot of young players at wide receiver, so I think he could have a really big year. But we're going to start off now with number 10, and that is Trey Brown. 58 tackles for him last season, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 12 passes defended. That's a lot of pass breakups. Playing the cornerback position, also pretty big for them on special teams as well. I think he's a really important key to this team and this defense. Of course, they're looking to get better on defense. That's what you keep hearing from Oklahoma fans. A new defensive coordinator, they're going to be better on defense. Will he be able to get it done in year 1? That's the question. They do have experience. They do have talent on that defense. It's just a matter of it all coming together, and I think he's going to be a big part of that. At number 9, we got Trey Sermon, 947 rushing yards last season, 181 receiving, 13 rushing touchdowns. Had a big year with Kenneth Murray. This team was running back by committee, and they're going to be that way again this year. So if Trey Sermon was the number 1 running back and he took the majority of the carries on most teams or any team, you'd probably see him at way over 1,000 yards because he's that good. But again, they have to balance that backfield. They're loaded there, but I think he has to be on this list. At number 8, we got Parnell Motley. Again, another guy in the secondary. They have a chance to have a pretty solid secondary this year, in my opinion. 63 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss last season, 3 interceptions, 11 pass breakups. So, yes, he was a big-time impact player for them in the secondary last season. And, you know, I've defended Oklahoma. I realized the defense wasn't great last year, but I think it was blown out of proportion a little bit. I think the numbers didn't tell the whole story. I don't think this was a good defense, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they were as bad as people thought just because of the conference they play in and because the offense scored so many points. It put a lot of pressure on the defense, and I won't get into that in this video. But anyways, at number 7, we've got Neville Gallimore, 50 tackles last season, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Also had 2 forced fumbles. So we're talking about an impact player for them right there in the middle of that defensive line. That's a lot of tackles for a defensive tackle. 50 tackles. You don't usually see those guys, you know, getting as many tackles because they're eating up blocks and all that. But he had a big impact on this defense, and I think he will once again in 2019. And at number 6, we got the tight end Grant Calcaterra. Last season, 396 yards, 15.2 yards per reception, 6 touchdowns. That's a pretty high average yards per reception for a tight end. You don't really see them with numbers that high all that often. You know, with some of the weapons gone from last season, I think he could make a bigger impact this year. I think he's one of the top tight ends in the country. Again, didn't put up huge numbers last season, but I'm looking for those numbers to go up. I think you might see him over 500 yards receiving and maybe closer to 10 touchdowns this season. At number 5, we've got Kenneth Mann, 51 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, had a sack, had a forced fumble, also had an interception. He was a big part of this defense last year. And you're talking about a defensive end with an interception. So that just shows you his athleticism. I think his numbers will go up this year. I think, again, you just look at this defense and the experience that they have. if they can put it all together, like I mentioned before, and we've already given you several defensive players in this top 10, they have a chance to have a pretty solid defense. At number 4, it's Kennedy Brooks. I think he's their best running back. Last year ran for over 1,000 yards, 8.9 yards per carry. That's an insane number. 12 touchdowns. He's a home run threat anytime he touches the football. And to see a starting running back, a guy with a lot of carries, have a yard per carry average like that, I mean, that is crazy high. And I expect him to do it again. Again, I think he is their best running back. Trey Sermon's really good as well, but the home run threat of Kennedy Brooks, I think, puts him a little bit above Trey Sermon. But both guys, very, very, very good. Maybe I would say one of the top 5 1-2 punches in the country. At number 3, we got the linebacker Kenneth Murray. I think he's probably their best player on defense. He had 84 tackles last year, 12.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Did a great job making plays in the backfield, an impact player for this defense. And he's the leader. To me, it all starts with Kenneth Murray. I think he needs to set the tone for this defense. And again, for a team known for their offense, we've got several defensive players on this list. And I think that bodes well for Oklahoma. At number 2, we've got CeeDee Lamb. Last year, over 1,100 yards receiving, 17.8 yards per reception, 11 touchdowns. Some would argue that he was better than Marquise Brown last year. Of course, Marquise Brown going on to the NFL. But he's clearly the best receiver on this team. He's going to be the go-to target for Jalen Hurts. And I wanted to put him at number 1. I would have put him at number 1 before the spring because I just think he thought he was the most talented player on this team, would have the biggest impact. But I was really impressed with Jalen Hurts in the spring game, and because of that, I decided to bump him up to number 1. You go back to 2017, threw for over 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, had an interception. Only one interception, 855 yards rushing. You know he's going to make smart decisions, and you know this offense is going to put him in positions to make plays both with his legs and throwing the football. I think he's going to have a monster year. I've seen the improvement, and if you follow me, you know that at one point I was talking about how Jalen Hurts was overrated, and I had negative things to say about him. But I have seen the progression really with what he did last year at Alabama. Coming in at times, and then in this spring game you could just see it. He, to me, is making better decisions, quicker decisions. He's been more accurate with the football, and I think he's going to have a heck of a year, and I think he's going to be the best player on this Oklahoma team. I'd love to get your thoughts. Who do you think the top 10 players are going to be for Oklahoma? Who'd I leave off this list? I'm sure I mentioned a couple of guys at the beginning. I'm sure there are other guys that are worthy of being in top 10 consideration, but this was my list. And this is what I put together. So again, give me your list down in the comments below and let me know what changes you would make. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports Big 12 Football Channel.